It's true, everything does have a life cycle. But let's start with the life cycle of a human, because that's something that everybody recognizes. And so you have an infant. If you put that in terms of currency, this is when the currency has the most purchasing power. So if we're referring to the US dollar, it had the most purchasing power when the Federal Reserve was first installed. A dollar bought a dollar's worth of goods. Then let's fast forward. My granddaughter just turned 10. Well, I'm going to be 71 in October. I am very certain that if you looked at her, you're not going to say, oh, she might be 71 in October. Just like you're looking at me and you're going, she's not going to be 10 or she's not going to be 11. She's older, right? So recognizing these patterns. And if I take it back to the dollar in that circumstance, I would say we had like kind of a young adult in 1971 when Nixon took us off the gold standard, when there was that first run on the dollar in the 60s, when other countries lost confidence and the U.S. was reneging on what we agreed to in Bretton Woods in the 40s. So I would say that we're kind of like a young adult, and we had about 28 cents worth of purchasing power. So they had managed on the gold standard by resetting gold a number of times to still reduce that purchasing power. You need to understand that that was the goal from the beginning. Inflation and the cost of inflation is baked into a government-backed currency. So here we are with Nixon. We're at a young adult stage, and now we're closer to my stage, right? We're at the end of this cycle, because back then when there was like 28 cents left out of that dollar, now there's only 3. And here's another parallel, and that's why I say we are at the end of this experiment, because the key tool that the governments use, and this is true all over the world, are interest rates. Interest rates regulate the rate and speed of inflation. So if you can say food for the humans regulates their health and their wealth. So can you see those two parallels, between a human's life cycle and a currency's life cycle? And so what happens when I get to 100? Right? If I'm still here, I'm probably going to be pretty close to dying. So the dollar is at 3 cents. It's pretty close to dying. And look at what's happened with interest rates once we hit 2008, which is really when the system went on life support. Well, what happened? They shoved interest rates all the way down to the bottom and held them there for like 15 years. And then all of the money printing that enabled, what happened then was they were forced, because inflation became visible for the public. So they were forced to raise the rates, breaking a 42-year trend cycle. Okay, that would be like if I had a heart attack. Then that means that my system is weakening. Well, we've seen that. This has been a problem for U.S. Treasury bonds, which is how money's created. They create the Treasury bonds. That creates the money in the system. And that underpins the entire global system. And now what do we see? People realizing how old and sick the dollar is and turning away from the Treasury bonds and creating this huge, vicious doom loop, because the world needs the treasuries to support the old system until the new system is in place. Is the new system ready to handle it? I don't know. I think we're going to find out. But what I can tell you is when the world stops buying U.S. treasuries, that is the death of the dollar. But everybody's going to be impacted because the world has been dependent on dollars, and it's still heavily used in trade. And the treasury bonds still underpin the global economy. It is all of these government fiat currencies and thousands more that do not exist anymore because of their life cycle. $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, but I can't buy eggs with it. So that's what I mean by a life cycle. And if you can recognize it just like you do for humans, if you can recognize that in the currencies, then you know the best, you know what the next most likely outcome is. right? And then it enables you to get into a position to thrive and take advantage of where we are in that trend cycle. And at the very end, that's such an opportunity if you're in the right place at the right time with the right asset, though. I've been thinking about this, and I don't know that this thought is as developed as I want it to be, but what I was thinking, all right, what is gold? Gold requires fiscal responsibility. Gold is bedrock. Why? Because it is used in every single sector of the global economy. So it has the broadest base of demand. It has zero counterparty risk, right? It is a solid foundation, and it is a commodity physical asset. When we had a convertible dollar, okay, I mean, they're brilliant in how they do this, right? But first, we started out with this 1 ounce of gold, $20 face value. And then we shifted to the gold certificate where you could walk in with this and walk out with this. So they were starting to teach people and train people to think of this as the same thing as this, which it's not. Then they brought in the Federal Reserve note. So you had all of these three things circulating at the same level of purchasing power at the same exact time. And for 20 years, right? 1913 to 1933, people got used to these bills and they got used to thinking of them just like this. So that in 33, when these two went away, what was left? The Federal Reserve note. So this is what was supposed to take the place of gold and create restrictions, particularly during Bretton Woods, when the whole world pegged their currencies to the US dollar. And the commitment was that we were going to hold it at $35, but we still had this level of restriction. But by the time Nixon took us off the gold standard, I just pulled up for a piece that I just did, a cover of Time in late 60s or early 70s. And it shows Nixon rushing in as defender with a shield and a sword and all of these bad and greedy Europeans and these bad and greedy Middle Easterners that were chipping away at the dollar. But the dollar was represented as gold, which, I mean, I've looked at that cover before. This is the first time that I actually realized and saw that what they were still continuing to try to do is have people believe that this was the same as this. Now you come forward and we don't know exactly what that new system is going to be, but we do know that what they want is a full surveillance system, something that Singapore is quite good at, from what I understand. And look at this representation of Bitcoin. How much does it look like that? So what they're trying, I mean, this is all perception management, trying to get you to think that, hey, this is digital gold. No, it is not. There are so many differences, but they want you to think that it's the same so that you adopt it. I say, and this is really for me where the big opportunity, and what I've come to understand over this last really year and a half is, even though community was part of my mantra, I don't think I really ever focused on it until about a year and a half ago when I went to Australia, threw out all my materials and started talking about community. And I'm still developing my thoughts on that as we're building this community. But what I've really come to understand is the importance of local community, because what happens as we're going through these transitions, you have weakness in typically, necessities, food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, arguably the most important now, and shelter. So locally, you have to do what you can to create security in those other areas so that when those grocery store shelves go bare, you can still feed your family. You can still maybe share with some people, other people that you know and you love. It is critical because you cannot live without food and you cannot live without water. Now, if we're going even further than that, this is the opportunity to create a quiet and peaceful revolution, to get sound money, convertible, redeemable gold back inside of the system. And that means, what I mean by that is, if you don't like what the central bank or the government is doing, you as the public have the ability to turn in one of these or even one of these and take out one of these, period. Because if you don't have that ability, just like we've seen in Zimbabwe that have been using gold to, well, first make sure that those in the upper echelon could protect their purchasing power when they were doing 1 ounce gold coins. They don't do that anymore. Let's just do the Zimbabwe gold. It's not in physical form at all anywhere, and you cannot redeem the gold. But hey, trust the government, trust the central bankers that are saying it's 40% backed by gold, and they are confiscating gold from the miners by making them deliver it in the local currency that is rapidly devaluing. That's another story. But my point is, this currency that was supposed to be backed by gold in April was devalued overnight 44% last October, and it's dying because it's not gaining adoption. Because once a public loses confidence and trust in the system and in the currency, it's virtually impossible to get it back. Maybe if they had done it sooner, because this was their 6th iteration of a new currency. And I hate to say this, but that's what I see happening in the entire world. And so coming together, all we have to do, if we can get 3% of the population, there's 8.4 billion people in this world, to convert their garbage fiat into sound money, physical gold and physical silver, guess what? I believe, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, we're going to find out. But if we can do that, I think that we have an opportunity to have a say in the next iteration of currency. And if I'm the one that's sitting at the table, I will sit there and I will demand that it be gold, and I would demand that it be redeemable. And it doesn't even have to be at 100%. It could be at whatever percentage is in there. I'll give up the rest of it. I don't really care. I want the ability to pull this out.